In this episode, we will review Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings.
I'm very excited about this movie. It has jewelry and Asian casting. I love this movie already, just conceptually.
Are these your two categories to
Yeah.
review?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, I agree. I'm very excited for this film. A big surprise for me, the casting, the story, and I would have to say the overall rating I gave it out of 30 was surprisingly a 29 out of 30.
I saw that you gave it a 29 out of 30, and I was like, oh my gosh, you really like this movie.
I did. I don't know if it's a combination of like going back to the movies and enjoying like a big blockbuster, but I also across some of the categories found that like it was just really great. I think the only category I gave it a 2 in was soundtrack, because honestly I movie soundtracks I'm not really I guess abreast of as of late.
Sure. So I thought that I had high expectations for the movie, right? The casting, in terms of the people that they got, Michelle Yeoh, Tony Leung, like Aquafina, I think is fun. It just seemed like it was going to be great from the start. And I had watched Kim's Convenience, so I knew the main character, or the actor who plays the main character, Simu Liu. So I felt like, he had a relatively secondary supporting part in Kim's
Mhm.
Convenience, but he was great. And so I was really looking forward to seeing what they could do. And in the overall ratings in the acting category, I gave it a 2, which is not really fair, right? So because you can't hire these heavy hitters and then give them a script like this and just say like, okay, they're doing a great job with what they have, but they're not like incredibly dramatic roles that they're being given, right? Like the story is a superhero story. So is it the best work that Michelle Yeoh has ever done? No, but
Yes.
she did a great job in the movie. So I just gave it a 2 in the acting category, which we should talk a little bit about the ratings, right? So out of a 30, the rating scale is 10 categories. Each category, you can get a max of 3 points. 3, it means it's better than average. 2 is average and 1 is below average. So they're very simplified ratings, t-shirt sizing almost. And so the average movie, if you get average in every category, is going to get a 20. So if you get anything above a 20, you're an above average movie, right?
Mm-hmm.
But so for you to give it a 29 is amazing. I think I gave it like a 24 or 25. Let's just take a look.
Well, are you a fan of the Marvel like superhero films?
You know what? I would not say that I am a fan so much. I would say I've seen a bunch of them. In fact, during the pandemic, I intentionally went back and tried to go in order to watch the major ones,
Okay.
and pick them up. So even though I'm not a fan, I have seen a lot of the most recent one.
Okay.
I know you're a big fan of
Yes.
at least the Marvel universe.
Yes. So I am a huge fan of the MCU, and I was very excited that this film was part of phase 4. However, I would have to say that with this film, had I didn't do my due diligence in terms of like watching or reading the comic book prior to seeing the film. But I was still pleasantly surprised. I thought the acting was great. I thought Liu did fantastic. And I guess my frame of reference for knowing who he is in terms of acting was Crazy Rich Asians. And I see these memes on Twitter and Instagram where he was like a stock photo guy.
Sure.
But I think that it's a really strong character, really great representation. The acting was it was well done. I also like the cameos from other people in the MCU, which I won't spoil, but I think that it's a surprising kind of thread and overall a lot of fun going back to the cinema. So it's great.
Yeah, it is it is so different to watch a movie like this in the theater than watching it at home. I mean,
Yes.
I think that's why when we look at our overall ratings for a movie, it's important to say where we saw it. Did we see it in the theater? Did we see it at home streaming? I know I have a hard time paying attention when I'm at home the way that I pay attention when I'm in the theater.
Mm-hmm.
And also, when I saw this movie, I was in France. When I started watching it, all the subtitles were in French. I assumed that the entire movie would be in English, though, so I would understand what was happening. But then when
Mm-hmm.
they were translating the Chinese language portions into French instead of into English, I missed out on a lot, I feel
Oh
like.
no. Okay. It may have been a huge it could take away from your experience, but that's pretty cool that you're able to see it in that way, like with the French subtitles, but that's great.
Yeah, so it was very fun, but I was also, because there's a lot of Chinese language in the beginning. And I
Mhm.
originally thought, oh my goodness, what if they sent the Chinese version to France? And so everything's in Chinese and is going to be translated into French subtitles. So I was a little bit panicked about 5 minutes in, but then it switched over. So I felt a lot better.
Oh, fantastic.
Average score between the two of us, it got a 27. You can see the different categories here. If you refer back to our introduction episode, we talk about specifically the different categories and how we feel about them. So you can go back and listen to that if you have a chance. But we'll give you in every episode kind of an overview of how we got to our total number, even if we don't talk specifically about each category. Do you have any closing thoughts that you want to talk about before we end this episode, LaQuan?
Closing thoughts. The second category I had was the story, which kind of, I guess, is an extension of the acting because you kind of have to get into this character. It's a world building for, the unfamiliar. And then also there was just a lot of, it's just so fantastical in its element. And so I guess I would have to say that I dip my toe in a number of these buckets, even though I need to keep to at least 2 to 3 categories to talk about. But I one thing I was consciously aware of was, the story takes place primarily in San Francisco. And of course, thinking about the MCU, I was thinking about Antman, which also takes place in San Francisco. And I was like, sometimes it's like, do people even remember what happened here a couple years ago in terms of disasters? But that's all I'll have to say about that. I mean, yeah.
Well, I think that'll be interesting, right? Like you mentioned earlier that this is part of phase 4. Can you talk a little bit about the different phases?
Well, that's a really great question. I'm not up on all of them, but I do know in phase 3 was definitely the past 10 years that we saw being built out with. I don't know if you're familiar with all of the MCU characters, especially with the Avengers. So that had a lot leading up to some of the events that happened at the end of 2019. So I know that there's some more world building from there, post Thanos. Now we're getting into some more characters that will stand out in the MCU and continue on what else is lingering that I will not disclose and I will not spoil because I'm notorious for spoiling things.
It's okay. Do you think, I think I saw the Avengers series.
Mhm.
So I don't remember what the very first one was, but I did watch, the two Thors and the Infinity Wars and like, I don't know, it felt like there were actually quite a few movies that I think there were maybe 8 to 9 of them that I sort of crammed in last year at home streaming. So I feel pretty caught up in terms of Avengers stuff. Now it'll be interesting because I've seen the trailers for Eternals. And so I feel like would you call Eternals phase 5 or part of phase 4?
I would consider them part of phase 4.
Okay.
So more world building. I wonder if Shang-Chi will show up. Probably not in Eternals, but down the road, I think that there will be some more. So
Okay.
it's like it definitely is a to be continued conversation.
Now I don't read comic books. Are do you like read the comic books and so that tells you what's going to happen in the movies, or is it kind of their independent paths now?
It does give you some direction due to storylines. So there's specific storylines with certain characters, and you can see them played out in the films. Not sometimes not in its entirety, the way that the story is told in the book versus the film, probably due to, I wouldn't say budgetary reasons, but maybe some other intertwining characters or storylines. I don't read every single comic book or story related to each characters, but there's a general sense of what will happen because it's played out in one of the various storylines that are given in comic books.
Okay. Well, good. I can't wait to see Eternals.
Yeah. in about a month.
That's right. It's not too far out. There's a lot coming out over the next couple of months. I think the backlog has gotten to the point where it's going to be a challenge really to see everything that I'd like to see in the theater in the amount of time that I have to devote to watching things in a theater.
Very true. Do you have any closing thoughts for Shang-Chi?
No, I mean, I had high expectations for it, even though I didn't really know anything about it other than the casting and but it lived up to my expectations. Like I was very happy with the movie itself, and I'm happy to recommend it to anyone. It was fun.
So this movie is not going to hell.
It's not going to hell, or I don't think so. I don't really get to say probably, but yes, as far as I'm concerned, it should not be in hell.
Awesome. So it's no movies in hell
so far. All right. Do we have anything to promote or plug for the next episode, or?
Be on the lookout on our distribution platforms for our POAP. So a POAP is a badge or a proof of attendance protocol. We will have a special code for this episode. Go on to your POAP app and redeem to get your badge. We will have something special for our listeners.
Awesome. I can't wait. The one thing that I will plug, I manage the meetup group I Heart Korean Movies, which is New York City based. So if you like Korean movies or heart them, you can join the meetup group, and I try to arrange at least just one screening of every movie that I feel qualifies as a Korean movie, which doesn't necessarily always have to be Korean language. There was an event for Blue Bayou because of Justin Chong, and it's loosely defined as Korean movies, but we also went to see Blackpink. We saw Train to Busan 2. It varies. Of course, we saw Minari. We saw Parasite. I Heart Korean Movies on Meetup if you want to hang out in person and you're in New York City.
That's awesome.
All right. So in our next episode, we're going to talk about Blue Bayou. Stand by for that.
Thank you. And please follow us on SoundCloud and Spotify, and also follow us on social media, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter. We will have lots of information and hopefully some good memes for you.
See you soon.